again. Here we are at IBTM Ljubljana Talks, Gorazd and myself, Jan Oršić. Today we have another fantastic guest, Kai Hattendorf. Welcome from UFI. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And it's an absolutely great event. And because I would imagine this is also one of the venues that is members of UFI?
Yes, both the organizer and the venue.
There you go. So tell us a little bit more about UFI for starts. What do you do? What is your vision?
Now, UFI is the global association for the exhibition industry. So we are the trade show tribe in the event sector. The businesses that organize shows like RX, the organizer of IBTM here, like the venues that host the shows like Fira Barcelona, the venue hosting, and selected suppliers of the industry. So for instance, I'm sure Freeman GS have been active here and they are members of ours. UFI also, because we are the global body, UFI is also the umbrella for many of the national and international associations servicing exhibitions and events. So here in Spain, there's AFE, the Spanish Fair Association. They're an UFI member. AUMA in Germany. Many of those from all around the world. And we provide the framework and network for all of these organizations to meet. So you see, we are the global apex body, as the Americans say, to bring the industry together around events, to provide research, to do education, and to do a lot of advocacy.
So we are at the trade show right now. It is, in a way, an exhibition. And how do you see the change, let's say, of exhibitions in the last couple of years? We know that it's been a lot of talk about, how to make events better, how to create the meetings industry in a better way, a new way. How do you see this through the perspective of using these spaces the way that we're using now or in a different way?
The amazing thing is, from one edition of a show to the next, you see changes, but you don't see something radically different. But if you come back after 3 or 4 editions, you'll see that essentially everything has changed. People are still meeting in a hall, and this is still a business events industry event, but the way it is organized, the way that the layout looks, the way the booths look, the way the technology works, all of that keeps evolving. And we don't really get the speed of change as we constantly do that, and we are in that evolutionary process ourselves. So I think the pandemic gave us a great opportunity to actually see that transformation that we have from one show floor to the next in a much more condensed way if you compare pre-pandemic shows with post-pandemic shows. And we have certainly become more digital. We've become more focused on the individual at the show. There's way more service. Food quality has improved. Wi-Fi accessibility has improved. Spaces for recreation and recovery, and the overall experience has changed a lot. So we probably don't even notice the degree to which we are evolving and changing the show floors as an industry. We just do it.
Super. With your background in communications too, UFI is a trustworthy source of information for the members, for the whole industry actually. How do you maintain that trustworthiness of your association? Actually, if you want to find something about exhibition industry, definitely first address is your website. So I know that there is a lot of work behind, but how do you see this media, I would say, role of modern associations?
Thank you for using UFI data, because it's a core function of a trade association to support an industry. And doing research, providing data that can be trusted is a core element of that. It's a service, it's not a product. It's something it's deep in our DNA. And we can produce the quality of research that we produce because, again, we work with the industry. For that UFI barometer that we do twice a year, we're asking every player in the industry to share some data. And because they know about the quality of the output, if they give quality input, they happily work with us. So it's a hard-earned reputation that we could use or lose rather easily if we were to mess it up. So we're putting a lot of effort into getting that right and making sure that the data we provide is relevant.
Super. Does it help that you have offices in different continents and you maintain this quite big, I would say, organizational backbone of the UFI? Can you explain a little bit more about that? How do you actually, what are the differences actually between continents? I would say in a short explanation. I know this could be a topic for itself, but basically, how do you see the differences and how do you manage this I would say global approach?
Well, in a nutshell, UFI never doubles the work of a national association. So we're not doing here in Spain what the Spanish colleagues are doing. We're not doing in Germany what the Germans are doing, or in the US or in China what the colleagues in the respective industry associations and bodies are doing there. What we can add is the international and the regional perspective. So UFI has 5 regions or 5 regional chapters around the world: Europe, Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa, North America, and Central and South America. And in each of these regions, we have an office and a regional director designated to be based in that region, because we need to be close to the members. I mean, arguably, when you're Dubai-based and your members in South Africa, you're not that close still. But you get my point. You're not just some headquarter in Paris. And through these regional offices, we can be closer to our members and see what are the respective priorities and needs in a region. Because these are different. In the Middle East, there's a huge need for education right now. There's a surge of industry growth, and they need to staff that, and so they need to train people. Similar in some parts of Asia. In Europe, it's a lot about data and research. In Central South America, it's a lot about business opportunities where people want to meet and network. So we take our activities, events, research, education, advocacy, and we then adapt them to the specific biggest needs of the regions. And I think that is the beauty of the way we are structured, that we have a very clear idea who we are and what we can do, but then we can regionalize that with our regional presences to make sure that we can provide the best possible support with prioritization in the regions.
If we say that IBTM World is a global exhibition, and I mean, as you just explained, you are a global association, how would you say that creating a global event, which is different than to a regional, I don't know, local, whatever, what would you say are the key elements of creating a world event that we have to have in mind?
By making sure that everything you do, you approach through that global lens. Now, we do regional conferences and a global congress, right? So the regional conferences for Europe, for instance, are very much focused on the top topics in Europe. Europe is a more mature market than, let's say, the Middle East, Africa. So there's a lot about business opportunity and new business in the programming there. If you do a global event, you have the broadest church in a way. So you need to make sure that you bring the right mix of voices to the stage and don't just focus on speakers from one region. You have to make sure that you break the content down in a different way. You can tackle a global conversation around climate change at a global congress, and then you have a conversation about regional implementation at the regional event. So everything you do, you need to think through the global lens, because your audience is coming to have a global conversation, not to have a regional conversation. So essentially, think from the customer's perspective.
Okay, so how much of this is actually also kind of projected then on the organizers? Do you work with the organizers of such an event, creating the content because these are industry relevance, or do you kind of just give them the outlines and then they do everything?
You mean our events or events like this one?
Like this one, for example.
Well, I mean, for here, they know perfectly well how to, I mean, we don't give the content for a machinery show to the machinery industry. They know best, because they're specialists.
No, I mean,
But as this is a meetings event or meeting industry event, we partner from the Joint Meetings Industry Council, which is then again the global umbrella body of all of us, and then UFI is a member. In that body, there's always a bigger fish, right? So we're partner on that level of the whole events industry then with IBTM and with IMEX to provide support and insights from our global community to the way they frame and schedule the content around it at these stages. So I just walked over to you guys now for running a session at the very other end of the hall on a main stage at IBTM discussing the implementation of net zero carbon.
You know, another fascinating part of the topic. I just want to have one more question. So what we've seen is there is a lot of new events popping up. I mean, sure, we also see that there's new venues, new halls being built, technology being implemented. It's, let's say, a double question. So one would be, how do you see your members adapting to perhaps, or are they at all, to what the hybrid or virtual concept of events was? Is it still relevant for you guys? And on the other side, do you see the trends of creating global events? Do you see them growing, or do you see them, turning more into the local focus or anything like that?
A very clear answer on the first one. There's a lot of digital potential around face-to-face, in-person events. But the digital trade show or the online fair is a business case zombie, and I hope we finally killed it off for good with the pandemic. In my 20 years in this industry, this came up when the internet came up, it came up when FaceTime came up, it came up when Second Life came up, it came up when the pandemic came up, and for sure there was a ton of money into trying to make that vision a reality, that digital event, that online-only event. All these approaches have not just failed, they have crashed. Because when it matters, people meet. So the digital only is dead. It is proven dead for as long as we live, I hope. Global, regional, local events. The Germans like to talk about Weltleitmessen, world-leading fairs, where the whole world comes to one trade show floor once a year to meet. And in a number of industries, these shows still exist. In most others, you're beginning to have regional leading shows. You have a show brand that runs a big show in Europe, predominantly for the European audience, a big show in Asia Pacific, for that audience, a big show in North America. So this regionalization has been a trend before the pandemic and has been kind of supercharged after the pandemic with the geopolitical disruptions we have and the inflationary pressures. Staying a little closer to home is an easier one to do. Whether this will turn around again, I don't know. But for sure, if you have 3 regional leading events instead of 1 global leading event, 1 + 1 + 1 is more than the one you had. So as an industry, we win anyway. As an industry, we grow by being closer to the markets, closer to the customers. And a lot of the growth we see right now, we came back to pre-pandemic, and now we're going above and beyond. A lot of that growth will come from additional opportunities, adding geo-cloning, bringing shows into more specific markets where there's critical mass for these shows. So the answer is both of the above.
Good. Geo-cloning, I like that.
Yeah, very, very interesting. One provocative question for you. I heard from the well-known influencer of our industry that if you want to create a real experience, go away from real estate venues, those who are selling square meters. What can you say about that? This guy will be our guest tomorrow, so we will ask him the same question tomorrow. Yeah,
there's a lot of truth in that. If you run a family event, you want to pick a nice space. There can be a beach.
Yeah.
There can be a space in a restaurant. So you go for what serves your purpose. So there are types of events for which I fully agree with such a statement. But everything that's in the business-to-business, trade-related space, where you have many-to-many conversations, the infrastructure we have built, the infrastructure we can utilize around the world with specialized venues, is the perfect place. Yeah. You need to add, because we talked about the power of experience before and the need to evolve. You need to add more spaces outside of the hall. Like tonight's reception is going to be outside, right? At our last UFI Congress, we were in Vegas, and we surprised everyone by having all social functions outdoors. People were thinking they would have to stay indoors outside, but we made them go outside. So it's about how you program the experience, but at the core, this infrastructure here, with the electricity supply, with the technical complexities involved, with the service level that can be delivered in such an environment, nothing beats such an installation and such a framework.
Totally agree. Next question. You were between the first actually measuring the multiplier effects of our industry, of trade shows and so on. Well, we say in Ljubljana that congresses are bringing to Ljubljana 3.3 times more than leisure guests, but for trade shows I know that you have calculation about 6-7 times more than classical tourists. But now we are coming to a stage where we also measure the legacy, you can call it like that, or regenerative effects of trade shows. Do you have any metrics for that, or does it exist for trade shows? Can you share a little bit more about that?
I was involved in a project that the OECD ran, where they wanted to define the legacy of global events. And global events for them are Taylor Swift's World Tour, or a World Expo, or a FIFA World Cup. Those are global events for the OECD. And we finally made them understand that international trade shows are global events. So the first big win is we are now in that fold. That was a good one. So, and we discussed the legacy. We discussed the economic legacy, which is easy. You can calculate 6.6 or whatever. For congresses, you go for average delegate spend per day. For exhibitions, our model is based on square meters sold and transactional revenue generated. You then have an ecological input and legacy that you can measure with what comes out of the Net Zero Carbon Events Initiative. We can measure the carbon footprint and then reduce it. In the social space, it's the most difficult one to measure. So we keep putting ourselves through that grinder that we say, we need to measure, we need to measure. The feedback I got from the market researchers working with the OECD as one of these global policy bodies was, no, please don't. You don't have the qualitative numbers, but you have such a big catalog of qualitative cases, case studies that show the impact, the social impact. Because that impact is different, the intellectual impact, the social impact, they're different from every event to every event. And you cannot compare that. It's apples and pears and grapes. And their guidance was, keep doing qualitative case studies. Maybe in 5, 8, 10 years, we have so many of these qualitative cases that we can see, are there common denominators? So are there data points that show up in critical mass that we can make that a data point? But we believe we need to measure legacy on that dimension. We don't. We have a big, fat, good body of evidence, and that is not just good enough, that is excellent to make our point. So let's not waste money on trying to nail the pudding to the wall. We have all the cases we need, and let's use them well.
Yeah, measurement. When you say measurement, it's also very relevant of what's happening, for instance, in Europe with the new legislation coming in, the sustainability standards, and bringing all this onto the daily agenda of every company. The impacts, of course, are one thing, but there's a lot of things that I think are happening in the background. So what would you say that for you at UFI is now the big next thing? What are you developing? What are you thinking?
The big thing for the next 2 to 3 years is and will remain our answer to the climate crisis. If we don't succeed in self-regulating us, in finding the right approach, we will be regulated. If we don't manage to present ourselves as part of the solution, with the meeting place and the marketplace that we build, if we can't make people understand that people coming together for one event generates a footprint that we can manage, but it is a way smaller footprint than decentralized meetings everywhere around the world. We need to make these points, and we need to be clear that we are part of the solution, not part of the problem. The other issue is digitization.
Okay.
We will become an ever more digital industry. And we have digitized in ways we forgot to mention. We're all doing email campaigns and outreach. We're all using CRM systems for customer management. We have digitized in so many ways. We've digitized the show floor. The advent of the smartphone, the iPhone in 2007 was probably one of the most defining moments of the show floor we now see here. People organized their whole presence with a computer in their pocket. Generative AI, what we saw exploding this year, is one of our 5 trends for next year. Next year, we're going to see applications of AI with a speed and dynamic that will match the arrival of the smartphone in 2007. So the 2 big themes for the next years, boy, we got to get sustainability right. And what a wonderful opportunity we have if we apply these new digital tools, not for their own sake, and not trying to reinvent the wheel, just apply the opportunities that lie within there to make sure we can focus ever better on connecting buyers and sellers, or givers and takers, on connecting people on the meeting places and marketplaces.
You actually answered. I wanted to make a comment right there in between, but you answered that one. But there's one more question that I have on the metric of measuring the effectiveness of events like this. And we were speaking about this with Gorazd before, and that is time. And I think digitalization and using the apps and being more efficient, that changes a lot of, sometimes the waiting game. You're waiting for the meeting, you're waiting for somebody to come who is delayed for whatever reason. Do you see that that in the way forward, we're going to be using even more of tools to optimize that then?
If the last 10, 15 years are any indication, yes. Will we always slavishly follow that alerts to go to this booth and that booth right now? No, because if we're in an interesting conversation, we will prioritize serendipity, right? So, boy, my phone probably told me that I need to wrap up with you guys and run someplace else, but we're having a good conversation. So, excuse myself for being late wherever I'm going next, right? And everybody knows that and accepts that because everybody's here in the same situation. So yes, it'll always make us more efficient. It'll make exchanging business cards easier, business contacts easier, follow-ups easier. It'll add a lot. It'll take care of ever more of the context around people meeting, so we can focus ever more on what this is all about. People sitting down like we now and having a chat, having a conversation about something.
Do you believe there is a place for some crazy startups in exhibition industry, and what kind of startups should they develop out of this digitalization? Do you have any practical example of it?
We saw a lot of startups through the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, those who are still around were those who actually then resisted the temptation to try to teach us something from a tech perspective, but who actually embedded themselves into this industry to become part of our ecosystem and work with us. Mm-hmm. And those are the event tech companies who are thriving now, who are really adding value to a physical event like this with digital services. In the session just now, there was someone speaking up who is a startup on micro-mobility here in Barcelona.
Interesting.
Saying, I can help you reduce your carbon footprint by providing micro-mobility solutions. Electric bikes, pick people up from hotels. So you see people coming from all kinds of the ecosystem. In the sustainability space, there are tons of startups who can help reduce the carbon footprint. The whole purpose of trade shows is to bring new ideas to market. Yep. And we as an industry are well advised to take advantage of that as well, and we run a bunch of UFI award schemes every year where we always look for innovation and best practices, and every now and then we have a really cool new startup going home with one of these awards, and then we are happy to see them thrive. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. You mentioned sustainability in different, I would say, contexts today, but do you measure your own event, the carbon footprint of the UFI conference in Vegas? Did you measure it or didn't? You didn't?
We didn't measure Vegas yet. Mm-hmm. We offset.
Okay.
All the Saturday activities that we did, all the social activities, we offset. And we calculated the carbon footprint of those based on the models we have. But because we said within our journey in net zero carbon, we were focusing on supporting the industry in step one. So we we signed up to net zero, for instance, as a supporter. We did not sign the pledge because we have to do our own homework. And right now there's a project how we make sure that we can measure our own footprint going forward. And we would do that by applying the materials that come out of net zero. So we've taken exactly the route that we're advising everyone to take. Join the initiative, join net zero carbon as a supporter. So plug yourself into the bloodstream of that conversation. Help us to bring the materials together, and then when the materials are out, use them and apply them in your context. So we're walking our own talk. Yeah, we're not leading there. We can't. We don't have the scale and the skill to do that like an Informer or RX. So we wait for their guidance, and we have their guidance now out in December in a bunch of webinars, and then we can apply it ourselves.
Very good. Well, at our event, Conventa, we measure carbon footprint for a long time, and it's approximately 86% goes to travel, the rest goes to production, to your part, I would say. And the venue is not the most problematic part. The hotels are second on our list, then venue, and then production. So how can you comment this? So first of all, of course, as a business, we need to touch the biggest problem, for, the transportation, and basically, what is your comment on these results?
Your problem is everyone's problem. The more international an event, the higher the share of travel-related greenhouse gas emissions. In the whole climate conversation, this is known as Scope 3. It is out of our hands to influence what an airline uses as fuel. So what we can do then within Scope 1 is the way what we directly impact and produce, and Scope 2 is how we work with hotels, for instance, or micro-mobility services on local transport and other dimensions. On Scope 3, we have to be bold enough to say, this is nothing we can change for real. We can give incentives for people to travel to the event in a climate efficient way. So we can place events in cities that have a good train connection, for instance. This is what we can do in the event design. But ultimately, we can help the airline industry, we can help the hospitality industry by helping them to have the meeting places and the marketplaces where they solve that. So host the conferences for them to discuss that. Build the trade show floors for their innovators and startups to come with the solutions. We can't solve every industry's problem that we serve. But we have to, but what we can do is to do our event design in a way that brings those 86% maybe down to 75%.
Your previous employer, Frankfurt Messe, today announced that they get a certificate, EMAS certificate, which is part of ISO certification. So do you still have a connection with the colleagues from Frankfurt? And this is a great news for the industry to get such a demanding standard, actually. So it's really a serious job behind, I know that. So basically your members are really working hard on that topic. But the question is, what do you think about it, and how others are following this great example? It's really fresh from today.
Yeah, and this is great because I mean, first of all, yes, of course, I still know many people at Messe Frankfurt, even 8 years after leaving, and there are two global tribes. There are the RX alumni and the Messe Frankfurt alumni. So we're all in touch around the world, and I'm in touch with the colleagues who are in Frankfurt. And greetings to all of you at Messeturm and all around the world, and Torhaus. And what this shows in a way is that most players haven't started from zero. And the Germans, as an industry, committed to be net zero carbon by even before 2050. And many of the German messes are really well advanced, reaching carbon neutrality as venues or energy efficiency, carbon zero, having set up good milestones and getting that certified as they should, right? So, and it needs the bigger players to take the lead and show the solutions so that can filter down. And the venues have a very special role. We had Kathleen Warden from the SEC in Glasgow on the panel just now. Her biggest lever is energy. 86% of the carbon emissions they have as a venue are energy-based. So they are becoming an energy producer of regenerative, sustainable energy. And they're not just going to go carbon neutral, they're going to go carbon negative. So they're going to take more carbon out of the atmosphere by generating energy and then feeding it into the grid. So the venues have a critical role. I'm thrilled about, I haven't read the Messe Frankfurt headline yet, but I'm thrilled about that being certified then, because it is exactly these examples that will help everyone on their journeys forward.
I love also the example of, let's say, the Ahoy from Rotterdam. They're doing incredible stuff as well with sustainability. This is such a big topic. I think there's so many questions that Gorazd and I would actually have just from everything that we're talking about. And this is what happens on Ljubljana Talks. But I think we gotta finish up with a couple of short fire questions. So, beer or wine? Beer or wine?
Both, depends on the day.
Train or car?
Train.
Train. Can you elaborate this a little bit?
If I can avoid taking the car, I take public transport or the train, right? I live 10 minutes away from the train station that brings me to the airport for my travels. I have the luxury to live in a destination, a city like Oslo in Norway, where there's an excellent public transport system. Mm-hmm. So every now and then we take our electric car and drive around, for the big food shopping once a week or to get the firewood for the fireplace. But if we can avoid, we use public transport.
Kai, thank you for being our guest. It was amazing. Thanks a lot. And stay tuned, colleagues. We are back in 5 minutes.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.